If you're using colors such as green or red or green, yellow, red to show risk acceptability for your medical device, you are not alone. This is a very common industry practice. But what does it mean? How do those colors show risk acceptability or not? What criteria are used? Friends, this is a very big topic of discussion and confusion in our industry. And as a result, we focused on this topic in our recent Q&A. I want to invite you to take a look at this recording in case you missed our Q&A session. And I want to invite you for our next month's Q&A session. We do these every month. And our intent here is to have a conversation and a dialogue. So this month, we talked about risk acceptability, common industry practice, confusion around color schemes, pros and cons of that. It is not a requirement of any standard to use colors, and yet this is an industry practice. So take a look at this video recording, share your questions and comments, join our knowledge sharing forum, and continue the dialogue. I look forward to hearing from you and hopefully seeing you in our next Q&A session. You guys can all see my screen, right?
Yep.
So usually, I know you guys have been part of this Q&A sessions many times in the past, but those who join new, I always tell them what it's all about. And we just get together, as you guys know, and talk informally. This is not a big presentation. This is not a one-way flow of information. This is more as a dialogue and a conversation. But I want to remind all of us again that we are recording this session, and our intent here is to be able to share this knowledge broadly with everybody else. And if you would be comfortable sharing your video feed, I know you guys, Greg and Ed, you already have it on, but if you would be comfortable, that'll be great for engagement, but it is not mandatory. Of course, it makes things better. And it's always, I just want you guys to feel as comfortable as you can. That's the whole point, but it makes things better. Okay, so I decided to talk about this topic as again, follow up to a LinkedIn poll that I did last month, where I asked a simple question to people, how do you determine your risk acceptability? Most people use a 5x5 table. And the practice is to have like a red or green color zone. So I was curious what people do. Do you do red, green? Do you do red, yellow, green? Do you do something else? And it generated, again, a lot of good discussion. So I want to show you the result. It was pretty broadly discussed. We got a lot of feedback from people, more than 6,000 views, 22 comments. And I just picked out a couple of comments for us to share and get started in our discussion. And there are a lot more, but intent here is to spark the discussion. So here was one comment I thought was interesting. In principle, the colors do not matter in Europe. The European laws require the risks to be mitigated as far as possible. In practice, though, we have two zones in 5x5 rating, and this is a pretty representative feedback. I've seen that in many cases. So in this two zones of 5x5 rating, where we have any individual risks that are left to the red zone, we have a bit more justification on why it is acceptable and explain that there is no mitigations available for that risk. This is the feedback we are receiving. Now, this was also interesting. I could live with RYG, which is red, yellow, green, pre-mitigation, but what good does yellow do as final decision? It's a good question. And there was another very good, insightful comment. Interesting discussion. At the end of the day, there is no requirement for a risk chart for any colors. The best use of a risk chart for the MDR would involve no colors or acceptability regions. It would be a tool to plot pre-control risk and post-control risk to demonstrate risk reduction. Another use would be to plot all post-control risks on one chart to document overall residual risk to establish the risk profile for the product. I think it makes a lot of sense. So this is just to seed our conversation. Looked at clause 6. This is what we have to do. For each identified hazardous situation, the manufacturer shall evaluate the estimated risks and determine if the risk is acceptable or not, using the criteria for risk acceptability defined in the risk management plan. So whatever you define in the risk management plan, many people do red, green, acceptable, not acceptable, red, yellow, green, and they have some criteria. So what I look at EUMDR, the requirement in this annex to reduce risks as far as possible means the reduction of risks as far as possible without adversely affecting the benefit risk ratio. So they're giving us a criteria. This is what they expect. Now, some people could say green would be as far as possible or red would be as far as possible. I don't know how you would combine this criteria with the color coding, which the industry does quite commonly. And that'll be a good topic of discussion today. So then I looked at, so just let me finish very quickly, 24971, 2020. Here is what they show. They don't show color coded table. They show a table in which all these individual risks have been mapped on this 5x5 grid. That's what they show. So yes, I will stop here and just set the stage for our conversation. Let me. So a lot of things to talk about, right? Risk acceptability. We have been conditioned to think red, green. Red means not acceptable. Green means acceptable. Not a requirement to use a color coding system. Regulation is asking for us to evaluate from as far as possible without adversely affecting benefit risk. And ISO 14971 is saying you decide how you will determine acceptability, but you must have a policy. So we have a lot of kind of openness in the way it should be done. And I'll be interested to know how it is being done in your industry or in your company, or what you have seen in your experience working with different companies, and how are people reacting or responding to these requirements. So I'll open the conversation with these broadly defined questions. And again, the intent is to talk. So go ahead.
Naveen, there's one point of confusion that has arisen over the whole 20 years of the standard. As far as possible is not a criteria, it is a policy, okay? So the risk policy is as far as possible. The criteria are established based upon the policy that you have in place. So criteria and policy are not the same thing. The risk chart is not a policy. The risk chart is a criteria based upon the policy, okay? And at the end of the day, the risk is either acceptable or not acceptable. One of the two, there's no yellow. So that comment about no yellow was based upon that. I wrote an article last year or so on the confusion around this and where we're going. But if you're selling in the EU, your risk policy is as far as possible without impacting the benefit to risk ratio. So that's your policy period for Europe. And then for other areas of the world, you have other options. There's a concern about the fact that Europe doesn't allow ALARA, A-L-A, let's see, as low as reasonably
as
achievable.
low as reasonably possible.
Achievable,
yes.
Because that is the standard for radiation products, X-ray machines, MRIs, and everything, as low as reasonably achievable. So for those products to go from achievable to possible, that's a bit of a confusion. However, the statement on the end is kind of interesting because without impacting the benefit to risk ratio can be interpreted as saying that cost is allowed to be considered, because if your cost of controlling the risk, of reducing the risk, makes the device unobtainable, too expensive to buy, cost has entered the picture there, and it is an excuse for, word excuse maybe is not right, but it is a reason for not implementing a very costly risk control measure. So there's a lot of discussion in this area, and Europe has certainly stirred the pot on that.
So I think what the thing is, they are leaving a lot of room for good judgment, right? When I hear without adversely affecting, cost is one. You made a good point, Ed, but also let's not make it too difficult to use.
Right.
If it becomes too difficult to use because we are saying do step 1, step 2, step 3, more chances for errors, right?
Yep.
So you made a good point, right? That AFAP, or as far as possible, or ALARA, these are policies, and based on that, you determine criteria, what will count as AFAP. And then at the end of the day, you decide acceptable or not. That's it. That's what we have to do. So I would love to hear from other folks on the panel today. What do you guys think? Red, yellow, green, criteria, policy. How are you dealing with all this? Anybody wants to share their current practice, their thought process, or what they have seen in their experience?
It's Greg Devine. So I will just say that over my years of practicing the risk management, I've done it both ways from two different companies. But I was taught by Mike Schmidt, who was on the original 14971 committee. He ingrained in me that there is acceptable and unacceptable. So some of the companies will have a yellow or moderate or marginal area, but I believe it was Ed's question is, what's the value of that? Because our target is to make everything acceptable, either as base design or with some sort of justification or mitigation. So I'm not sure, in the last company that I worked for, their policy, they did have a marginal area. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but you're always targeting towards making it acceptable. It's either acceptable or unacceptable. Could be that you need a justification to make it acceptable, but that's my philosophy or my point of view on it.
Yeah, but we still see so much of red, yellow, and green. And I wonder, and this is just speculation on my part, I wonder that when we use colors, we are already kind of psychologically oriented towards not having anything in the red. It looks not good. And as a result, maybe we are struggling to show, like, it cannot be green. We don't want to see it in red. Could we create yellow to make it a little bit more appealing to the eye and also not raise as many questions? This is pure gut feel from my side. I don't know what you guys think about that. Do you get questions from auditors if you have risk in that? There's no reason, nothing wrong in having an individual risk being unacceptable and still the overall benefit risk being okay. The standard allows you to do that. But we don't want to be seen as having anything in red. So I'm kind of guessing this is the kind of problem or dilemma people face in presenting their risk management documentation to people and being seen as not very responsible. So would love to hear your thoughts on that. It's just a pure speculation on my part.
I'll add one comment there on that red, yellow, green statement there that you made. Yes, notified body auditors are challenging companies to use that and saying you can't use it. So you have to come up with a strategy for use. And one thing I would say is yellow is useful in pre-mitigation to tell you which risk you can reduce and get the greatest benefit for overall risk. So the ones that are in that yellow region, by fixing those and getting them reduced down into a green region, would be where you have the biggest bang for the buck. You get more overall residual risk reduction by moving those after you've done the red. The red, of course, is first. Those are the ones that are very impactful, and we need to reduce them for sure. But then the yellow would be the next region. The green is where you have the lowest impact for overall residual risk and reducing that. Yeah, and then after, one more thing, and I'll be shut up.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Once you get past into the post-mitigation region, there is no yellow. Okay, that goes away. It's either still in the unacceptable region, that's when you have to go to benefit risk, or in the green region, which says, I've done all these as far as possible. And Greg, my colleague for many years was Mike Schmidt. I worked with him in the same company. So we've had a lot of those discussions. So I appreciate you bringing Mike's name up because he's always been dear to me.
Yep.
Thank you.
So people want to see a progression, right? Moving from red to yellow, yellow to green. Maybe that's why they use these colors. Maybe in their internal systems, they say, we want visibility to
Yep.
see how we are addressing these risks. But to me, it still kind of opens up to interpretation, right? What criteria are you going to use to move something from yellow to a green or red to a yellow? Are we defining that? And if that's what our practice, I would love to hear from others today if they have some criteria like that, that clearly tells them what moves from red to yellow and yellow to green. And
There is also,
sorry, go ahead, Alexei.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
there is also very often the confusion about the color green in general. Many people or notified bodies also think, okay, pre-mitigation state, my risk is green, so I don't have to do anything with it. And I believe this is a very big problem, also like psychologically seen, and the policy should definitely define that every risk has to be like reduced as far as possible to be like compliant with the MDR. So there is like no risk at all which can be accepted like a pre-mitigation state. You also have like to reach out and to see whether you can actually do something against it or not. This is
Great
why I
point.
personally don't like the green color. Because it
Yes.
because like assumes that you are actually acceptable right from the beginning.
Yep.
Great
Yeah,
point.
I
Go
would
ahead, Shalu.
I would like to add something like Alexi told, because we just had lots of last 3 years doing MDR remediations because I'm based in Switzerland, so we have only MDR now. So, but he's right, because there is really this psychological bias when you use green color. So we stopped using the colors 2 years back completely in our company, because when you use the green one, then you really pre-mitigation also means you don't do anything. You say it's acceptable. So from the beginning, it's acceptable, which is wrong. It conflicts with your new EU MDR regulations as well. So we've stopped using colors. Plus, what we have adopted, one more strategy we're trying to improve is to give them, like you showed Naveen, the table from the 24971, because you try to put each and every risk into a category. Earlier, I will just give you example that just for a very simple device we had, it was 5x5 matrix and given with RPN numbers. So what happened there was very risky thing, because if your severity suppose is 5 and occurrence is 3, it's 15. And the same thing happened if severity is 3 and occurrence is 5, 15. So you put them in the same category, 15.
I see.
But that's not true. So then we realize it's wrong, because now in our company, the practice is really to put more mitigations or look at the risks more if severity is more, but the probability is less. Suppose this example I gave you, because it was very confusing in the beginning. So right now what we are trying to do is not use any colors, but individually put each and every risk there and then come up with this. And of course, ALARP for us is not allowed anymore. So we have to go with AFAP. And we did, after our audit last year, we did something very interesting, which was accepted by notified bodies, quite welcomed by them. Because then when you have done all the risk assessment and there is no way that you can reduce this risk any further, we left it like this and did a nice risk benefit assessment. They accepted this. But then we had some discussions with clinicians, and inside we made one more addition, or you can say annex to our risk management reports, the inevitable side effects. Which are really associated with the procedures, not bought with your devices. So if a person has those things, you just can't do anything. This is not, you can mitigate. So, but that was quite welcome, because that's what was done by the core team with the dentists here, because it was a dental product. That this is not this risk, of course, you put it that this can happen because of your design, blah, blah, you mitigate. But this can also be a normal side effect of the procedure of implant placement. So then
Right.
we make an annex that we assess these risks, but these risks may also be present. We can't do anything if
Right.
surgeon does something wrong.
Right. So it makes
So
sense to
it's
me, but
kind
I have a
of,
question for you, Shalu, though. When you move from no colors to no colors,
yeah,
that is a pretty significant shift in mindset.
very, very.
And
It helped.
tell us a little bit more about how you manage that shift in mindset, both internally and among your notified body auditors, because they're probably used to seeing colors.
Yes, but for us, it was a surprise that notified bodies expected us to remove the colors.
Oh, okay.
So what we are struggling is more internally.
Okay.
We are still on the process. We've not completely done for each and every device. We started with the simple ones, low risk ones.
Okay.
So for the high risk ones, we are still struggling, means on the path, because we still have time, 1.5 years to go completely to MDR. So right now for us, half of the products are MDR under CE, but half of them still have the old certificates. So we are improving, but challenge is internally more.
Yeah. If I hear you right, you said the notified bodies were okay with notified body auditors.
They were
was
okay.
with
At
it.
least for us, it was okay. It was DECRA and TÜV-SÜD, and both were fine.
Okay, so that's good. That's a good sign. That means.
And the only thing which I can share with everyone was, maybe, I don't know how you see it, we had a very nice, quite experienced person who really advised us to have this appendix as inevitable side effects, which may
That's
also
a good
be
point.
seen. So that's, I guess it's good for all of us to maybe think about this. We only did it for one device group still.
Do you put that, Shalu, do you
everything.
put that inevitable side effects appendix in your risk management report?
Report, yes, in the risk management report.
Perfect.
Because you can't do any analysis on them, you can't evaluate or mitigate them, so they don't become part of your risk management plan. They only become part as an annex to your risk management report, that you've done this analysis according to the policy you made, according to your plan, you have this report, but there is an additional part here.
Excellent.
Something we did, and we tried with the simple first audit, and it was quite welcome. So
that's great. Very good.
We are in the process right now.
Yes.
It's a huge stuff right now for all product groups to do risk management. So it's going
what
on.
I'm hearing is that having no colors in your 5x5 grid or 3x5 grid would be acceptable, maybe acceptable to notified bodies, and that could promote this direction in movement in the right direction of not using colors.
But it depends notified body. I mean, it depends on your notified body as well. So we tried with the simple thing, and we were open to it, and we were ready that if they don't accept, we go back. So we didn't do it for a class 2B and high risk stuff still. We were still with class 2A and low risk device.
So how do others feel about this? Jed, Alexei, how do you guys feel about this whole discussion in terms of not having colors at all? Is that helpful? Is it harmful? Does it leave room for ambiguity? What are the pros and cons in your mind?
Yeah, I think what Shalu just described was really good. Like, you know, that's convincing me to go without the colors, right? The way she has described.
But believe me, you will be challenged. Means I'm still struggling internally more, not externally.
The issue is, Naveen and Shalu, the issue is these things are so notified body specific, right? Depends on the kind of notified body you have. It could be completely different. And we're kind of hoping, we were hoping that, you know, 4971 could drive some sort of standardization around it, right? So, but it's very notified body specific. However, you know, technically, I think I'll go back to Ed's original point where he said, you know, you could use that if that helps your particular process. At the end of the day, it's, you know, it depends on the context. So, and I think it was Alex who mentioned driving, because the biggest danger, which I have seen, is it was Alex or Charlie, you said, if something is green, then I'm not going to do anything about it. I think that could be one of the drivers why everybody said, you know,
for us, that was the driver. Because people said, it's green, so why we have to have a mitigator there? Right. Then our alarms were raised. Okay, no, this is not fine. But this started for us almost 2.5 years back, and we're still struggling. Oh, it's huge change if you have to do within your organization.
Right, right. So Jed, you are making a good point that you can use it, but use it properly, use it with clear guidance, descriptions, criteria, and expectations. Because the reason is that we get so fixated on the green and red are very strong colors, and they have very huge impact psychologically on people, right? Intuitively, we make a lot of assumptions and judgments just by looking at the color. Somebody actually gave a feedback on the LinkedIn poll is that it could be any color. It could be purple. It could be yellow. It could be blue. It could be anything. Yes, it can be anything. But be mindful that when you choose colors, you have to think about how we humans think of colors and how we respond.
Yeah, and especially if you have lots of women in your risk management team. Colors are really a trouble, believe me.
Well, yeah, it goes for everybody, Charlie. It goes for everybody. So let me ask you this.
It's my experience, because if you have different colors, then it's more challenge.
So let me ask you this. Like Jade, you made the point, it depends on the notified body. But at the end of the day, I'm thinking, again, this is just my thought, they will move towards some common expectations. These notified bodies are different companies, but they have pretty much, they are working for the same end goal of, looking at the MDR requirements, how they are practiced, and somehow they should also be talking and sharing best practices, right? And if this makes sense, hopefully it'll move to that direction.
Yeah, someday maybe we'll get an MBCG guidance on that.
There you go.
That will be the thing that
that will be ideal.
That'll be ideal.
But until then, I propose another way of addressing this. Is initially all risks are red. Okay, they're all unacceptable. Then as you go through them one at a time to reduce them, then when you reach as far as possible, they become green.
Yeah.
So you have spots all over the chart that are red and green. Just depends upon where they are in the process of reduction of risk. So that may be a way of addressing it. Another thing we haven't laid on the table here, and it's something new, is the use of product safety standards.
Yes.
And the product safety standards, if they identify a hazard, then it is red. It is unacceptable. And then if they propose a risk control measure and you implement that risk control as written in the standard, and then you perform the tests that are required in the standard and achieve the results expected in the standard, then the risk is automatically acceptable. It is green, and you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to worry about as far as possible, because as far as possible is defined in the standard, okay? And it's a state-of-the-art document, so you can depend on it for that. So if you got anything that's identified in the standard, take advantage of that approach, and then you can focus your efforts on deciding what it is elsewhere, because this stuff's already been done for you.
So you are saying, Ed, it could be a way to track progress. It
Yes.
could be a way to track through your design and development, even post-market, track how things are moving and how individual risks are progressing from the red zone to the green zone, if you want to use colors, because it could be pretty visual, right? Yeah, great point. And then again, people may say same logic applies. Okay, I will create a yellow zone. That's what people have done. Create a yellow zone to see how far I have come and how far I have to go. It's all, I think, all kind of way we humans like to analyze things in a visual way. I think that's what, and some people like to do it. Some people don't like to do it. There are pros and cons. There's no right or wrong answer here. But actually what it does is it creates a lot of, I would say, perceptions about the feeling of risk, not just the absolute value of the risk. Anything in green depends where it is, right? There are in the green zone, there are areas which are really low, but there are areas which are right at the border. And if you make a judgment that I don't have to do anything, then that's a problem. Or same thing for red. So we make these, I believe we make these judgments based on perceptions driven by the color. That's my feeling about this. But good discussion. What else, guys, you have in mind about risk acceptability? What
I
are
really
some of the
like
current best
Shalu's
practices
approach.
for you? Sorry, go
I
ahead,
really
Alex.
like Shalu's approach because I've seen also the same issue like you mentioned with the red color. As people tend to pick, for example, a lower probability so that the risk shifts into the green region so it doesn't look so bad in the end. And I mean, this is a huge mistake in my opinion, because then you basically on paper make your product safer than it actually is, and you're missing out on perhaps creating a benefit risk analysis which could actually make the product better and safer. And well, I mean, leaving out the colors lets you really focus on the process itself and not like on this like psychological game whether something is green or red.
Yeah. Okay. So what, if I heard you correctly, what you're saying is that something might be, some risk might be in red, and the way you have defined your red and green zones, just by doing a little bit, it might sneak into the green zone. They're the border.
Yeah, for example,
might
engineer
make
could say, okay, now it's red, like let's pick a probability lower so it becomes green. And I mean, it looks better on paper.
Yeah. And it might be at the border, right
Yeah,
at the border.
exactly.
Right. And then you might say, well, I'm fine. But if you didn't have colors, it'll come down in probability based on your controls, but you will still evaluate using benefit risk on your criteria. Is it as far as possible? Right. So there are a lot of nuances to this. And where I was going with my comments was that I think we get so, our perception gets so deformed by the colors. And I've done a lot of research on the feeling of risk, where we look at some data, but we feel about it differently, the way it is presented to us. There's a lot of research out there. And a lot of that could be happening in the industry. And you guys touched on that. Any other thoughts and comments on this? I know, Usman, you have just joined us, or you are not. No, he's not there anymore. Maybe he left. So yes, any other thoughts and comments? What else on your mind about risk acceptability?
Well, let me read from 24971 of the things that need to be in your policy.
Okay.
Because the first is applicable regulatory requirements. Well, we talked about MDR, so we know about that. Right. I talked about the next one, which is standards. That's something that is accepted, that approach. And then the next thing is generally acknowledged state of the art. And that's from a review of standards, best practices, results of scientific research, publications from authorities, and other information. And then the next one, which really gives us a lot of angst, I think, is validated concerns from stakeholders. For example, obtained through direct communications from users, clinicians, patients, or regulatory bodies. And every patient is different. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we even have the patient's families that sometimes enter into the picture here, because the patient may not be able to make a decision. And so we have their family that comes in. Or through indirect communication via news reports, social media, or patient forums. So there's all kinds of things that fit into choosing this criteria. And, as far as possible, needs to consider all these elements as well. So it's a very difficult subject, and it takes time to consider. But, this discussion is a good one because it brings all these things out. And just the perceptions of red, yellow, and green is an important consideration.
So let me ask you, Ed, then, would then that, based on what you described, and that's really, really true, would there be an expectation to see some kind of a, requirement description or criteria description under these 3 or 4 bullet points? What does AFAP mean? Based on the 24971 guidance, it has 4 different areas or 4 different categories. In each category, would there be an expectation to say this is how we interpret AFAP according to the standard, the SODA, the regulatory requirements, and the stakeholder expectations. And there are examples in 24971, I know. But would that be something that people can use to establish in their system?
Okay, this is part of the policy statement, okay? So you need to have consideration in your policy for each of those elements. And you might point to how you achieved that statement in your policy. What was the basis for achieving that statement? And a policy is not part of your risk management procedure. It's not part of the risk management plan for a device. It is part of a corporate policy level document. So the way you develop corporate policies would be the way you develop a risk management policy.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the considerations that need to go into it. And that needs to go to the highest levels of the company and to be approved by your top management. So you're going to have to present to them your reasoning behind why this should be the policy. Because they're not going to originate it. The top management's doesn't have a clue how to do this.
You have to propose. Greg, you were trying to say something. Go ahead, please.
I don't know that I was, but
okay. Somehow it came up.
Okay.
So Ed, building on to what you just described, what I think might happen at the policy level, they might just write some broad language in these 4 areas.
That's what they're going to do.
Right. Now, someone has to take that and translate that into some specific criteria by which they will evaluate those 4 areas.
Now, there's another important consideration there, Naveen. It needs to be for each product.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And it needs to be different for different types of products. So if you have earlier somebody said a class 2A and 2B, and maybe a 3, those are different types of products. And they need to be considered differently. So your risk management plan needs to have the criteria for that particular product in it. And it doesn't need to be something that was copied out of 14971 or something that I saw at another company or anything like that. It needs to be developed based upon the criteria that are in your risk management policy for that product. And you would expect, if you were an informed auditor, and we don't have many of those today, that they would be looking to see in your risk management plan if that's appropriate for that particular type of product. And one of our problems is, just as I just stated, the lack of informed auditors. People don't have the education, background, training, and experience, the competency in risk management to be able to make some of the judgments they are making.
Mm-hmm. So Ed, again, I want to continue building on this because this is a very, very important conversation. If I understand correctly, you are saying you should have a broad umbrella risk management policy at a higher level, and
Yes.
then you need to translate that specifically in a risk management plan for a certain type of a product. Is that, did I hear you correctly?
That's where the criteria come from. The policy doesn't establish criteria. It is the direction your company wants to go.
Okay, so let's play this out because I think it's going to help our audience and everybody. Regulatory requirements, that will be policy level. And in the product, you will say this product is sold in Europe, so it must meet MDR requirements.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Second item was safety standards. This product is electromechanical. It must conform to these XYZ standards, right?
Yes.
You will see in the
Yes.
plan.
Yeah.
Okay, the third item, state of the art, right? This product competes in this product family. Here are the types of patients, intended use, whatnot. This is a technology. This is a kind of evaluate what our criteria would be for this product in consistency with the policy, right? And then the fourth thing is stakeholders. Let me just quickly finish it. The fourth thing, stakeholders. So in the plan, we would expect to see a specification or some description of which stakeholders we are addressing through this product and their concerns, because those concerns may be different. So we would like to see in the risk management plan these 4 items, how they're addressed for that product, kind of in compliance with the overall risk management policy. Is that the right way of thinking about this, Ed?
Well, kind of. The policy establishes those elements and tells them what to consider in developing the criteria. And you just have the criteria placed in whatever formats you're going to use.
In the plan.
And, in the plan. Let's see, what you mentioned something, and I wanted to comment on it. And I lost my train of thought there.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, it must not have been important.
No worries. But what I'm trying to distill down to people is, see, at the policy level, there'll be general statements. General statements. All applicable regulatory requirements must be complied to. All product safety standards must be followed, right? All state-of-the-art requirements should be considered, and all stakeholder feedback should be considered. This is the kind of general language you will see at the policy. Now, at the risk management plan for the product or product family, we would expect to see some specific details under those 4 items. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and there's 5 examples in Annex C of the standard that give you some, just for a statement, the purpose of the policy is to provide guidance. The policy applies to all persons establishing and reviewing. So there's some statements in there that you can look at to kind of give direction. They're not specific, they're general in nature, but they will help you as you write this policy. These are the considerations that should be in the policy.
So just to close on this, that will be a separate document, policy document.
Yes, it's at the corporate level in the corporate policy manual.
Would you expect to see that in a quality plan? Quality at the highest level in the quality management system?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Second thing is, then in the risk management plan, we should see a reference to that policy document and specific details applicable to the product, right?
I can just tell you one example, because I don't know, with the policy, we didn't write something very nice, I guess. Okay. But in the plan for different device groups, there's a clear criteria, which kind of clinical experts or the expert groups using the products should be part of risk management or risk evaluation. Okay. So that's mandatory. It's a part of risk management plan and strategy. But at a corporate policy, I don't know, honestly, whether we defined anything at this level. It just is compliance and everything. But at least in the after policy, we have at our organization a risk management strategy, which defines for different product groups, you should have different kind of means. You shouldn't be evaluating risk for class 1, same like class 3, if it's a low risk device. So then you have a strategy. That document transcends 2 plans and then different plans for different devices.
So there is connectivity.
But in the plan, it's clearly mentioned that you need to have, it's a must. Experts from the intended use or experts from which kind of group you have.
So what you're describing, Shalu, is connectivity. Connectivity to a higher level strategy or policy, whatever you want to call it. And then specificity at the plan level.
That's in the plan level. Yeah. That's what we are doing, means we did already. I have no idea corporate policy, but yes, risk management strategy, which is then way level down from the policy.
So I'm going to throw out a question here for us to think about. If that is so, if we can be different in specific details at the product level in the plan, could we have red and green for one set of products and red, yellow, green for another set of products? Is it in the realm of possibility? Would that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, if you're using colors, yes. If you're like me, not using color anymore, then it's simple.
It makes things more complex. So I think the reason I mentioned that to you guys was on purpose. It was only kind of half serious. The reason I say this is because it forces us to think differently about different products. Not just red, green or red, yellow, green. If we are going to use colors, let's put some thought behind that and say what makes sense. A capital equipment product, I'm doing a project for a large client right now. They have surgical implantables and they have capital equipment. two very different types of product families. You have to look at them differently. Still being consistent with an overall approach, but be different enough. So are we going to treat everything as red, green, or everything as red, yellow, green? I think we seem to be living in this world of either or. For some reason, that doesn't go very well with me for some reason. I think we need to be a little bit more careful in how we set it up. So I don't think this will change that much, right? People are still going to use colors. They have been using it for a long time. And Shalu, we'd love to hear from you how your organization moves in that journey. Because that's a big change. That's a big change.
It's a big change. So we are halfway, honestly. Not even halfway, I guess.
And the risk for you is that if you change your notified body and that auditor suddenly says you must use colors, now you are, in a pickle, basically.
Yeah, that is the risk we have. Yeah. And that's the assumption that we won't change these two notified bodies for Europe.
Or some.
They will stay same because they are same last 15 years. We are with the same 18 years.
So it's fascinating.
Yeah. So it's Tekra and Tusud. Yeah.
So they have so much influence on how we set up our processes.
But we are very confident we're not going to change unless something else changes in EU. Because right now the EU is already in a mess, complete mess.
Okay.
So we don't know. But at least, yes, that's a risk if we take. If we change notified bodies, then maybe we have to come up with the justification of not using colors once again.
Yes. Yes. So again, one of those big topics, and this is what we do in these sessions. We talk about these big topics, not with the intention of coming out with, a recipe, do X, Y, Z, but better understanding. And I'm hoping that we talked a lot, and we are already very close to our closing time. But I wanted to leave some room for any other thoughts, discussion, key hot topics, even outside of this, that is on your mind. Let's talk about that in the next 5-10 minutes.
Well, I'll bring up one, Naveen, that has happened in the last month, and that's the FDA's shift from 820 to 13485.
Yeah.
And if you read between the lines, and I've been in some discussions with FDA, so I've got a little bit of background knowledge, I guess I'd say. Risk is a big part of this because FDA is saying, we're shifting where it was mentioned once in the regulation to where it's all over the place in the regulation. And the considerations for risk in purchasing, and CAPA and all elements of 1345, risk pops up. And then we, of course, sitting out here on the edges, we're talking about MDR. MDR has risk mentioned 243 times in it.
Yep.
That's how many times the word risk appears.
Yeah.
So it's moved from that one-time wording to this greatly expanded. So now, as we move to 1345 for all devices, because it's pretty much everywhere else in the world except the US right now.
Yeah.
We're going to have to be looking carefully to make sure that we are covering all of the risk requirements that are in that standard. And then, of course, it says that they're talking about compliance risk and product safety risk, those two things. And I've seen some confusion about including project risk and business risk and those kinds of things in there. And then there's also the confusion about the fact that there's surgical risks and treatment risks that are outside the manufacturer's control. How do we handle those? Well, we don't. Basically, we have no control over that part. So we've got to get our arms around what risk means now in the new world.
So I'll ask this question, how are people feeling about this, guys? I mean, what's the general sense out there?
No comments because we are already with 13485 since 2016.
Right, but I mean, and I think a lot of the large organizations are like that.
Yeah, I guess so.
But there'll be a lot of small to mid-sized companies who, let's say, are not doing 13485 today. They don't have to, the way they sell their products. I'm getting a sense that that might have a huge impact on them.
That was part of the economic impact statement that's in the regulation. You know,
Yep.
What's the cost going to be? And the FDA did not really. I saw this the last time in 820. The economic impact statement was not correct, and it's not correct again.
Yeah. Well, so I did read the whole thing, by the way. I read the whole report.
Yeah.
And I understand how they calculate it. It's an estimate. But
Yep.
the end of the story is what they're talking about is what I'm concerned about is a one-time cost, one-time setup and startup cost for most small to mid-sized organizations.
Yep.
Those who are not doing 13485.
Yeah. And
that is
especially in the areas in PMS and CAPAs, supplier controls. Believe me, it's huge win 13485. We have so much investment done last 4 years for supplier controls, supplier compliance.
Right. But think about this. Many of the organizations who are not doing 13485 may first have to become aware. Become aware of how it fits, right? That's a one-time cost they're talking about. In the transition, the journey from QSR to QMSR for those organizations. The big companies, they're already doing it. They have probably kind of two parallel systems in place. And that's where the benefit they are saying is that they'll have cut down in redundancy. So the benefit is realized by organizations who are doing both. One-time cost has to be taken by everybody. That's whatever the numbers are in the economic report estimate. My understanding is that most of the benefits in redundancy reduction is realized by large corporations, and the one-time cost has to be taken by everybody. That's the bottom line I understood from that report.
The other piece is, which was not maybe brought out enough, is that the quality system regulation and 1345 are 95% the same. 1345 has been revised over the years to get closer to 820.
Right.
So the two are almost the same. So the work shouldn't be maybe as dramatic as some people think it's going to be. But there's still going to be effort involved. There's still going to be things that we have to do differently, like the supplier risk and those kinds of things. But we're still, if we want to sell in the US, going to have to file a 510K or a PMA. That didn't change. Okay. The vigilance reporting, the MDR, that didn't change. The recall, that doesn't change. The people that are doing combination products, though, are going to see differences. In moving from 820 to 1345. So it's going to be within the quality system part of it that we see changes. And there's a whole lot of peripheral stuff on the outside that does not change. So the effort may not be quite as much. You're going to certainly have to change procedures and change citations in them, and maybe some wording and things like that are going to occur. But the foundational activity is probably not going to change a lot.
Hopefully. Except that now the focus on risk is a little bit more.
That's the one that's more important. Yes.
So it's gonna be a challenge for people to start connecting the dots everywhere.
Although I will say this, Naveen, risk has always been part of 820, because if you read the preamble, which nobody does, it's all over the place in there. It talks about it for suppliers, it talks about it for CAPA, non-conforming, and every place in the preamble, it talks about the FDA's expectations. The other interesting thing there, this was written in between 94 and 96 when they wrote the preamble. It talks about the 4 steps that the FDA expects to see in risk management. And that's risk analysis, risk control. The next one is was it risk evaluation,
Yep.
risk evaluation, risk control, and then finally the post-market activities.
Yes.
Those are the same 4 elements that were put into 14971. Those are the same 4 elements that are in 1345 for risk. So that hasn't changed, except for the application to a broader area.
That's right. And I think for what people are going to find a little bit challenging is to make this connection. See, I think we are not used to applying risk in a comprehensive way unless we are forced to do that out of other compliance reasons, right? So if people are not operating under that model already, they're going to probably struggle with it. So I think this should be a topic in itself. What do you guys think? Right?
Agreed.
This should be a topic in itself in future with, again, getting focused into subtopics. But I'll be very happy to hear from you some feedback, how we can tackle this as our topic. So,
and we also should make comments on
Yeah.
this. You should submit comments. They made it easier to do. You can do it electronically now. So please, the last time there were 10,000 comments submitted on 820 when it was revised. So,
and the deadline is, I believe, May 22nd or something like that. So we don't have a whole lot of time. And I went to the docket, by the way. I went to the docket. There are some, but not at the pace that you are talking about. I don't think,
Right.
So you are right in giving the voice to this, hey, let's put comments and, let's share our opinion. And it matters. Guys, we are again coming to the end. So I really, really appreciated your time. I hope it continues to stay useful to you. I want to, again, do a very quick pitch because a lot of people are going to see this recording as well about the knowledge sharing forum. And I know many of you are here on that forum already. My ask to you is please engage. Drop a comment, raise a question, start a conversation. Let's pull other people in. That's the whole point. Because if we are able to manage that conversation on an ongoing basis, it'll help everybody. So the forum is there. There's a link, and I always send it out as part of the meeting follow-up. Encourage other people to join. If you know in your organization who might benefit from this, it's free to join. So encourage all of them to join. So with that, I will say thank you again to all of you for taking the time out on a Friday morning, Friday afternoon. And we will be in touch. We'll be in touch. Yeah. Please let me know what's on your mind, what you would like to see in the next meetings. So this should be all sourced from everybody who attends. Thank you again and have a good day. Good day, everyone.